Welcome to the broadcast, my dears. We will begin with a statement from Kensington Palace for those of you who might have missed it today. Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales was admitted to hospital yesterday for planned abdominal surgery. The surgery was successful and it's expected that she will remain in hospital for 10 to 14 days before returning home to continue her recovery. Based on the current medical advice, she's unlikely to return to public duties until after Easter. The Princess of Wales appreciates the interest this statement will generate, and she hopes that the public will understand her desire to maintain as much normality for her children as possible, and her wish that her personal medical information remains private. Kensington Palace will, therefore, only provide updates on Her Royal Highness's progress when there is significant new information to share. The Princess of Wales wishes to apologise to all those concerned for the fact that she has to postpone her upcoming engagements. She looks forward to reinstating as many as possible as soon as possible. And I'm sure that you will all join me in sending our wishes and prayers towards Catherine for a very speedy and full recovery. She is at the London Clinic in Marylebone. There are over a dozen police officers stationed in and around the facility. So it seems that the short international trips upcoming, for example, Rome, are now in doubt, and there's no further international travel planned at this very moment. But it is being said that the issue is thought to be non-cancerous, and Catherine was last seen 23 days ago for the Christmas service at church. And I'm afraid we have a further medical update, this time on behalf of His Majesty the King. The King will be admitted to hospital next week, you see, to be treated for an enlarged prostate. And a statement from the palace said that in common with thousands of men each year, the King has sought treatment for an enlarged prostate, and His Majesty's condition is benign, and he will attend hospital next week for a corrective procedure. The King's public engagements will be postponed for a short period of recuperation. This is an unusual disclosure to come from a member of the royal family, intimate in nature as it is, but we should all be encouraged by that on this occasion because it shows us that the King is keen to raise public awareness around the issue of prostate wellness, and it's in order to encourage others to be checked and role model that throughout the kingdom. So again, our thoughts and wishes are with His Majesty and his family and anybody else's family who might be going through the sufferings of various conditions or simply looking after themselves. Congratulations to the fruits of Denmark on your new king. Wasn't that a joyous occasion for King Frederick X? He's rather lucky he landed on a rather cool looking numeral, didn't he? Frederick X. Yes, the 10th Frederick, transitioning with big footsteps to follow, in the shape of Queen Margrethe, and I will share the tidings from our king to your king at the very end of this broadcast. Now, the main bulk of the latter half of this broadcast is going to be focusing on the Robert Hardman book with the new revelations that have come forth and revolving around Prince Harry. Following on in some ways from the previous broadcast, which was beautifully received by so many of you who seem to enjoy me giving a Jackanory storytelling of the excerpts and passages that we've seen so far from that book. So I'll be continuing on that vein, and if you wish to jump ahead and just watch that, then I will put a timestamp for the beginning of that in the description box. But beforehand, I would like to progress with a royal romper. And there is some pleasant news involving the King because a new portrait has been revealed. It's the one we've been waiting for. It's the new official portrait of His Majesty, chosen by His Majesty for government-funded distribution across the kingdom. And it's going to be hung in schools, council buildings and courtrooms in an effort to boost a sense of civic pride and to remember what unites us. It was taken in November by Hugo Bernand at Windsor Castle in the Grand Corridor. And I was a little bit thrown initially because when I first saw it standing back, to me it looks as if he's looking off to one direction. Do you see what I mean? From one of his eyes looks a little bit boss-eyed. That threw me a little bit. But then when I drew closer, it looked as if he was looking directly at camera. But it did throw me a little bit. I thought they might have got it a little bit more spot on there. I also would really appreciate it if the king would shut his mouth during photographs and perhaps take a little ticket from his predecessors, from George's 5 and 6, who very nobly were able to shut their mouths. And if that sounds a little harsh, I'm firm but fair. My inspiration is Mary Poppins, and as she says to little Michael, we are not a codfish. But he didn't slouch. He did look very handsome, more handsome than many of the other coronation photographs, I've got to tell you. He looked really nice in that naval uniform. It might have been the Admiral of the Fleet uniform, but very dapper. I love the way that his sausage fingers were deftly concealed, one hand holding the sword, one leaning on the little side table there against the white gloves. Very nicely done, ingenious. And some of the points of interest that you might notice on the photograph there involve number 1, the Bath Sovereign's badge, 2, the various medals, at 3, the Royal Victorian Order, and at 4, the Garter Star, at 5, the Thistle Star, at 6, the detail to the sleeve indicates the rank, and at 7 is the Order of Merit, and at 8 you can see the gold aiguillettes, a type of gilded cord. As we've come to know, the Princess Royal is a style maven, totally unconsciously and without any effort whatsoever. And it was revealed at Milan Fashion Week that Sylvia Fendi's collection was inspired by the Princess Royal herself, our dear Anne. Fendi described Anne as the chicest woman in the world. Do you hear that, my dears? Princess Anne, the chicest woman in the world. And it's a point that I've been realising and coming to terms with myself and sharing it with you over the last few months, haven't I, my dear? I've been astonished at her elegance. It's been an education for me, and I couldn't be happier to see it acknowledged. But then again, like Princess Anne, I don't particularly or especially care who acknowledges her and who doesn't, because she just gets on with the job of channeling the royal spirit and being Anne, and everybody falls at her feet, as it should be. And actually, it inspired a menswear collection on this occasion. Fendi said, I fell in love with the style of Princess Anne, who to my mind is the most elegant woman in the world. When I saw the coronation last year with Princess Anne in her uniform, I thought she looked so beautiful. So I said, let's be inspired for a men's collection. And you can see heavy duty waterproofs, sun hats, tweed overcoats, this kind of thing. And this is absolutely nothing new. Anne is continually discovered, rediscovered, deconstructed in a sort of postmodern style-y, generation after generation. It's nothing new, but it is something royal and rather delicious, isn't it, my fruits? It is. Happy birthday to Mia Tindall, who turns 10 years old today. Doesn't time fly? 10 years old she is. Many happy returns, Mia, my dear. Of course, we're speaking about the confidant of Princess Charlotte. The two are thick as thieves and get on very well, gossiping away. And Mia's parents, Zara and Mickey, were in the flush of love yet again. What's their secret, my dear? They're beyond the 7-year itch, aren't they? Who knows what's going on? But they're in the flush of love again, not on a beach this time, but on the red carpet, for some sort of Netflix extravaganza involving rugby, Six Nations full contact. And she wore a check navy coat, black heels and a clutch, and just a few days earlier in Australia you saw photographs of them at the races with Zara in shades of blue and orange. Rather interesting, that look, isn't it? A dramatic hat or fascinator affair with silver accessories this time. Very versatile. And of course Mickey couldn't resist donning the fascinator again, as he's wont to do. It's becoming a little bit hackneyed for my taste, I've got to tell you, but for those of you who find that sort of event amusing, I'm thrilled for you. A comment from Miss Lee NY. I can't remember which video it is where you praised the York girls and suggested the public was too harsh on them. So I decided to listen to their interviews at your suggestion. I am so impressed. More so with Eugenie, but Beatrice seems nice enough. Eugenie, though, poised, well-spoken, intelligent, showing genuine caring toward the less fortunate and such a terrific speaking voice. Dare I say, it is not just smooth and pleasant, but very sexy. That is what you might call smoker's husk, my dear. Smoker's husk gives that velvet on silk effect, if you will. She could start up as a jazz singer, couldn't she? But yes, she does have a wonderful voice. I really like this girl, and I'm glad you called for a re-evaluation. Yes, and I have to do it quite often, to be honest, because they've been getting the fuzzy end of the lollipop. And of course, I'll poke a bit of fun here and there over them, as I'm wont to do. But one thing I won't do is invest in scurrilous rumours that take off like wildfire all over the internet, largely in relation to their association with the Harkles. I will certainly criticise them for certain things, but I won't indulge dramatic conspiracy theories and all kinds of nonsense on stilts. I won't, and I'm glad that you saw how good and kind and decent the girls really are, because they are. And Eugenie did appear at an anti-trafficking event in Davos, Switzerland, to raise awareness of modern slavery. She, of course, founded the Anti-Slavery Collective way back in 2017, so long before Andrew was in hot water again, and long before the Black Lives Matter movement and everything involving Meghan and Harry. She was already working on anti-slavery, and she spoke alongside Theresa May this time, and she was supported by her sister Beatrice. And we all know that she enjoys bold fashion, and this was no exception. This was unique. This was a unique top for Eugenie, and I'm not opposed to it. But who else would you see wearing that particular number? Other than Eugenie? Nobody. Can you think of one other person in the whole world who would walk into a boutique and see that and think, yes, that is the one for me? Eugenie sees it, and whether or not you think she has an eye for fashion, she has an eye for her own tastes, and I encourage it. Ooh la la, as little Princess Lottie would say. Our dear Charlotte, ooh la la, I'm coming over all art of memoir, because the Duchess of Edinburgh enjoyed an evening of enchantment at the French residence in London, a chic gala for the Dispensaire Français, a non-profit providing medical support to French-speaking people in the United Kingdom. The gown was embroidered with the glimmering metallic by Maison Alea, a midi dress. She has been patron of this get-up for a couple of years, and she looked absolutely stunning, didn't she, in this number, sort of A-line clutch by Maison Valentino. Actually, something about it gave me Grace Kelly vibes for some reason, something from my memory. And the dropstone earrings were by Pomegranate Jewellery. But she did us proud. And in a Wonder Woman flash, she appears in a completely new wardrobe with a new style for a gathering at Catherine Low Settlement, Battersea, for their 100th anniversary celebrations, and the settlement has a century's worth of experience in reducing poverty and isolation and bringing the community together, and its core programs support over 500 vulnerable locals every week, the elderly, children, young people and refugees. The Duchess visited to meet volunteers and staff, to learn and to thank them, and the photographs are enchanting. See her enjoying the pom-poms there. Lovely pair of pom-poms our Sophie has. This is while she was joining elders in their chair dance classes. Oh, I've come over all Sally Bowles. It's a bit like the Kit Kat Club, isn't it, my dears? It's a bit like the Kit Kat Club there. Life is a cabaret. And Sophie is going to shake those pom-poms until the cows come home. Diddly diddly dee, two ladies, and speaking of which, she also joined in with a sewing circle for women. No, that is not a euphemism. A true sewing circle and some mentoring sessions. This place was opened in 1924 by the late Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, in her role as the Duchess of York, who returned in 1964 for its 40th anniversary. So do you see the tapestry of royalty that is woven generation to generation on regal thread? Sophie was wearing cashmere, this creamy roll neck here. The jacket was in emerald green, very fresh, and the skirt was by Gabriella Hurst, so she was not plain, and on the toes, brown suede pipers. She received a fragrant nosegay in coral, primrose yellow and magenta blooms. That was today's royal romper, but now we must turn to the subject of Harry, a nitwit of a completely different safari. And he's been pumping iron, by the way, in Santa Barb's. Yes, he was spotted emerging from the gym. Oh, where's Olivia Newton-John when you need her? Let's get physical, my dear. Oh, Harry, keep on pumping. Keep on pumping it up, boy. Pump, pump, pump. Get that body jacked and ripped for your wife. She'll want to run her hands down that sharp torso, ripped physique. Oh dear, the mind boggles, doesn't it? We are returning to the excerpts from Robert Hardman, who provided further pieces of this puzzle. This is through his lens, using his sources, and I believe the tome in its entirety will be released tomorrow. I have noticed already that despite what appears to be a fountainhead of sources from various palace insiders and courtiers, and this, that, and the 20th, much of what is written is stuff that we already know. But we find that in common with lots of these books that comes out, isn't it? So bits of rehashes here, there, and everywhere that I will try to avoid regurgitating as much as I can. But as for some of the further highlights, following on from the previous broadcast, and as I said, I was so touched and moved by your comments to the previous broadcast. They're always lovely, but for some reason the last one seemed to affect many of you, and many of you found yourself blubbing along in tears as I read my notes to you. And I appreciate the fact that you appreciated what I did very much. Thank you, my dears. Well, as you might recall, when Spare was published after the late Queen died, Harry wrote about his relationship with the late Queen, and he said, "We had secrets, special relationship. That's what they said about us. And now I couldn't stop thinking about the specialness that would no longer be." Well, I hate to give you a wake-up call, Harold, my dear. I hate to be the one to do it. But yes, 99% of relationships between a grandmother and a grandson are special and described as special. It's ubiquitous. And I'm sure the same thing was probably said about Peter Phillips, Zara, William, the Yorkie girls, little Jimmy Seven and Lady Lou. Who doesn't feel that they have a special relationship and bond with Granny and Grandpa? Most people do. But of course, it's different with Harry. It was different. She could really talk to me. She really got me. Was the relationship special as you were tarnishing her entire legacy in the most dramatic fashion that we have seen in modern history, with your intentional attack on that family, this kingdom and the Commonwealth, and all our reputations? The word special has many connotations, Harry. We are told that when the book was published, those around the palace raised an eyebrow. They were surprised by the incidents that were omitted rather than the incidents included. It seemed they'd become resigned to that, but there were lots of things that you seemed to leave out. He's told us from memory that he began with an 800-page book together with Mooringer, and eventually that was chopped and diced down to 400 pages. So perhaps further revelations will appear in Spare to Spare, the next generation, or in Meghan's memoirs. But it's very interesting how you are so prepared to give us the juice on so much, and yet omitted a little chapter on the naming of Lilibet. It was Zippo, wasn't it? It was Zippo. And what was forthcoming? Goose egg. Goose egg. And on that subject, a staff member claims that the late Queen was as angry as I had ever seen her after the Sussexes declared that she had given her blessing over the name of Lilibet Diana. As you might remember, warning shots were fired by the Sussex camp and their team of legal hawks and ravens and libel mavens. And that was when the BBC dared to question this narrative of theirs, as did other publications at the time and many others. It is claimed that the Sussexes lobbied the palace to back them up in the face of these press reports that were not towing the Sussex line and not doing exactly what Harry demanded. But I'm sad to say, Harry, it was a case of recollections may vary. A little dose of RMB, as it always is in relationship to those two, because they're pleased the palace were rebuffed. And who was at the top of the pile at the palace? Lilibet I, Elizabeth II, Lilibet I, the original. Harry is like Madonna Louise Veronica Ciccone in the song Frozen. You only see what your eyes want to see. Well, you, Harry, only hear what your cloth ears want to hear. It's a question of perception, and it's a warped perception. And in some characters I've met throughout my life, and I do understand that we all receive and perceive in completely different ways, and one conversation can be interpreted in many different ways, but when you meet those characters that do it so dramatically, that have such a lens and such a filter, that they will take something innocuous and make something wicked out of it, I can tell you from my personal experience how terrifying it is. It is terrifying because they are operating on a warped wavelength, and it is my hunch, my suspicion, and the suspicion of many others, that that is a similar wavelength to the Sussexes of Montecito. The libel action, however, against the Beeb, old Auntie Beeb, never materialised. Oh, where's big boy Alpha? Where's big boy Alpha Hares with his big old balls? Oh, there they are. Oh, there's his ball. Oh, they're not quite as weighty and as pendulous as our big willies, are they? Piddly little plums, like wrinkled prunes, with that little todger attached. The libel action never materialised. It was a sound and fury from Prince Harry, signifying nothing. As you might recall, in October of 2022, Random Penguins announced that Spare was near completion, and it began to eclipse important news stories involving the king, such as the news of the first coins, which is a big moment in history. The first coins that were struck featuring the new king would normally be headline news, but of course his son, via Random Penguins and J.R. Muringer, was stealing the limelight. And we are told that a palace staffer at the time branded them headwinds that we face from across the Atlantic. And so began a very long run of headlines, 12 weeks or more, wasn't it? The funny thing is, though, and it's noted in this book, that despite 12 weeks of headlines with all new assertions battering the king and his family, it actually appeared to not damage the king. The polls remained the same or even improved. His reputation, the attitude of the British public didn't waver. There wasn't a huge plummet or nosedive in popularity. If anything, rather the opposite. How strange. Is it because the nation was echoing the idea that recollections may vary, especially if they spring from the lips of the Duke and Duchess of Betrayal? And in December of 22, the trailer arrived for their Netflix show, Grab Your Popcorn. Of course, it happened to arrive on the same day as one of the King's ventures. It overshadowed his meeting with the charity called Business in the Community, and he is a founder patron of Business in the Community since 1982. It was the 40th anniversary, and originally he had met with the black leaders of the time in 1982 and had helped cajole the heads of Britain's industries into more socially responsible and inclusive policies for recruitment. Well, this clashed with one of their other vulgar endeavours, one of their other overreaches to collect trophies and do a trolley dash with all their awards. This time, do you remember, it was that Cripple of Hope affair. Ripple of Hope for Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Foundation, recognising their work on racial justice, mental health and social impact initiatives. These vulgar ceremonies, do they really not sense it? Do they really not catch the pong of it in the air? Vulgar, 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 the whole charade. A former palace aide made the point: much of the Caribbean gets its news through US outlets, and the US media was generally more sympathetic to Harry and Meghan at that time. So Megxit plays directly into this debate. That's a good point. And then, of course, we got the airing of Harry and Meghan by Netflix, coming to a theatre near you. Harry said, "There can be a temptation or an urge to marry someone who would fit the mould, as opposed to somebody who you, perhaps, are destined to be with." Trying to throw shade, are you? Harriet? How catty. William was the one that was implied for this aspersion, that he didn't marry Catherine because he loved her or was destined to be with her, but because she fit the mould. What, the mould of a beautiful figure that perhaps you wish you'd got your hands on first, but big brother beat you to it, little Todge. Always number two. Well, William was implied, but also Charles, you could say, might have been implied. Anyone in the family he could have been trying to disparage, but most people got the impression that it was his brother. And a friend of the family says to Robert Hardman that on top of all the other breaches of trust, here was Harry making a blatant attack on Catherine. For William, this was the lowest of the low. And as I've said repeatedly for years now, ever since this all brewed up, it was the besmirchment of Catherine that made William incandescent. And that incandescent flame continues to burn. And it does make you think if the Princess of Wales and the King are on Harry's mind this week, as both of them visit hospital, and Catherine in particular has a 2-week stay ahead of her and then months of recuperation. Not that I am putting that at Harry's doorstep whatsoever, but the stress that is created by their mischief and accusations that have leaked only recently regarding both the King and Catherine and their supposed conversations, which absolutely nobody believes, further put them through the ringer, doesn't it? Not what anybody needs. Mr. Hardman claims that the Queen, had she survived, would have been dismayed to hear commentators on the Netflix documentary describing the Commonwealth, her Commonwealth, as a privileged club or Empire 2.0, which had been created by Britain in a way that protected its commercial and capital interest. And Mr. Hardman makes the point that actually membership of the Commonwealth had reached record highs only 6 months earlier, with the addition of 2 member states who had previously been colonies of France, voluntarily coming over to join us in this enterprise. And he says that it was not created by Britain, it was built by the 8 free and equal nations which signed the London Declaration of 1949. Did you skip history class too when you were at Eton, with your head out of the window, smoking and toking? We are told that William's staff are adamant that both William and Catherine refused to read the book. They refused. How royal. And we've already heard from Harry himself that the King is unlikely to have picked up the book. got better things to do. The late Queen had the Racing Post. The King has first editions of the Shakespeare Folio, this kind of thing. There are really some other things to do other than flick through that muck. And I don't blame the Walesers for refusing to read it. They lived it. They don't need to hear variable recollections. This staff member of William's says neither of them read it. William is a grown-up 40-year-old with the BBC app on his phone, so he knows what it says, but he has people like me to tell him what else he knows. We gave him the key points. And another of William's team tells us, my boss, William, would say, whatever the rights and wrongs, I hope that people feel I behaved properly in keeping my counsel. You can imagine what he feels about this, especially regarding what has been said about his wife, but he is being admirably grown up. He has certainly showed some maturity in the past few years, hasn't he? Never complain, never explain. Apart from that one moment where he was heckled and said, no, we are not a racist family, aside from that utterance, no complaining, no explaining. Head down, getting on with the job, earning respect. And Hardman continues to list many discrepancies between their fictions and the truth that we all know about in Spare. You know, one's revealed in Spare. I'm not going to list all of those off, but he tells us that the king does not dwell on the matter. He has learned over long years of royal domestic trauma how to compartmentalise issues over which he has little control. And then there is a little segment on the red-plumed bicorn hat that the Princess Royal wore to the coronation. Remember the feather and the plume, that wonderful, gorgeous red plume that blocked the spectacle of Harry in the seats, wasn't it, darling? Well, if you cast your mind back, you might remember that I revealed that my information about that episode was that actually the rumours were true, that it was sort of at Anne's behest, if you will. I think that's the word I used, at her behest, but I made the point that it was not actually intentional or made in a malicious way, that it was more to do with a sense of mischief when the hat was under discussion and that there was much laughter. I said there was much laughter, and I mentioned the Tindalls. Laughter when they realised that Harry might be the one who had his view obscured. Well, perhaps that was intentional, perhaps that was at Anne's behest. This is what I intimated to you, I alone. Robert Hardman, what he tells us, that Anne didn't set out to wear the plume deliberately to block anyone's view, and he says that she was heard saying later, the hat was an interesting question. I said, are you sure you want me to keep the hat on? Because it's quite a decent-sized hat, and the answer was yes. There you go, not my choice. Apparently that's what Anne said. And he says that it was never originally a snub to Harry, and that the Lord Chamberlain's office don't think like that. They don't think that way. But Anne only switched seat after her request for a speedy exit. He tells us she wanted to get away, and so at the last moment she decided to change seat, and that's how she ended up in front of Harry. Well, one would think that if she wanted a speedy exit, that she might have plumped for the spot on the end of the road, because it was only one away, and it was filled by the Duke of Kent. And I'm sure that if it meant that much to her to get away more speedily, she could have just nudged along one and obscured the view of Princess Alexandra instead of Prince Harry, couldn't she? Alternatively, she and Sir Tim could have even taken the place of Sophie and Edward, who were on the front row. It worked out very well how it was, but if it was that important, she could have, as a couple, swapped with Edward and Sophie. There were various options. So the devil is in the detail. She did the old switcheroo and originally had no intent to block anyone's view, was concerned about it. But when she realised that the Lord Chamberlain wanted her hat to be kept on, and it occurred to her that she was going to be obscuring someone's view, she did the old switcheroo, and she used the excuse of saying that she wanted a speedy exit, according to Robert Hardman, and wanted to be nearer the aisle, and she chose the spot in front of Harry. She knew who was going to be behind her. She was a considerate woman, and she considered that Harry was the best option for sitting in front of. And I said it before months ago, and I will say it again, there was much merriment and mirth-making and laughter revolving around that decision and the repercussions of what the appearance of the plume and its obscuring might entail. Let's finish with His Majesty's message to King Frederick and Queen Mary of Denmark. Your Majesties, my wife joins me in writing to convey our very best wishes on the day of your accession to the throne of the Kingdom of Denmark. I look forward to working with you on ensuring that the enduring bond between our countries and our families remains strong, and to working together with you on issues which matter so much for our countries and the wider world. I pay tribute to the many years of service of your mother, Her Majesty Queen Margrethe II, and remember fondly the frequent visits between our countries, including our visit to Copenhagen and Elsinore in 2012. I was delighted that your Majesties were able to attend our coronation last year, and I much look forward to future opportunities to celebrate the close connection that unites our countries and our families. Charles R. Thanks for your company. I look forward to seeing you next time for some more fruity tidbits. Ta-ra, my dears, and toodle pip.